You know the seas are gonna get rough, but love's the right stuff to get us over. Well, there's a place for everyone, no matter what race or creed. Might have to leave our possessions behind, travel light. No need to push, no need to shove, Lord have mercy, 'cause we're all one family. Brothers and sisters help each other. It's gonna be alright. We need every hand on deck. You know the seas are gonna get rough, but love's the right stuff. Oh yes it is, to get us over. And we need every faithful heart, otherwise we're going to. Oh yes, love's the only ship that can make it across. The seas are gonna get rough, but love's the right stuff to get us over. Well, there's a ship called love getting ready to sail, and people I know, you know it's time to get on board. Yes, I know you know it's time. I know you know it's time to get on board.
Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. So happy to see you all here.
Hello, everyone. So good to see you.
So glad to be on this ship called love with each of you. Love is the only ship that can make it across, as Eric Bibb so wonderfully shared. So this is our second in our monthly online series hosted by the Beloved Community for Engaged Spirituality in this new year of 2026, with our new meeting time of Saturdays 11 to 12:30. And we're so grateful you're here. Thank you for taking the time on your weekend to join us. We're going to meet again next March the 28th. And we're going to be having a wonderful person come to share with us, whose name is Amita Schmidt, about Deepama, a very amazing Buddhist teacher and meditator. And so that's next month, March 28th. And I was just quickly adding the capacity to take in more than 99 people, because we usually just can take 99 people on our plan, but I was able to quickly upgrade. So we have a little over 100 here today. So Amita has written a book about Deepa Ma and had spent extensive time with her. So Dorothy will put the link to register for that gathering in the chat. Okay, Adam.
Hello, everyone. And so I just wanted to remind everyone that this gathering and all of our gatherings are open to all. They are held in a spirit of deep ecumenism. So, whatever your background or religious affiliation, whatever spirituality or practice you are practicing or exploring, you are welcome here. You do not need to belong to any particular faith or tradition to take part in these gatherings. At the same time, both Kyra Jewel and I um, teach grounded in our own traditions. So, Kyra Jewel is a Buddhist teacher, I'm a Christian priest in the Episcopal Church. And when we offer those teachings from our traditions, we offer them not as something to impose, but rather as resources we have received from those in whose footsteps we follow. And from there, we keep sort of pointing towards what Howard Thurman names so beautifully, the importance of tending your inner life. Or, as he often said, listening for the voice of the genuine within yourself and staying connected to that deep place within you that animates you with love and guides you how to live. So, this is sort of the spirit in which we offer, and for the next few months, we'll have guests, but sometimes we also offer teachings as well for those of us for those of you who have been traveling with us now for maybe 4 or so years.
Thank you. And one of the people in whose footsteps we walk is here today. And not to embarrass you, Matthew Fox, but just a dear mentor and elder and powerhouse of engaged spirituality. So just want to bow deeply to you, Matt, and thank you for being here with us today. It's just an honor always to be in your presence. So we're going to invite you now to check in via the chat with just a one word. What are you arriving here with? What's on your heart? We know a lot of things are up in the collective consciousness today. So if you would put a word or phrase in the chat of just how are you? What's alive for you as you join in today? Invite Adam to start reading a few of these.
Yeah, so we have curiosity, tremendous pain, devotion, hope, grief, Iran, heaviness, open, curious, peace, openness to change.
Gratitude, miracles, wonder, healing, looking for connection, prayerful, grief about our bombing of Iran, sickness, hope, sad, determined to keep the light alive, fear and joy, worried, uncertainty. So we hold all of these and all that we weren't able to read. Thank you for sharing just the truth about what you're holding. A lot of grief and sadness about this war that just started last night. And so we're gonna need KNEAD. We're going to need this grief and all these emotions in the meditation that we're going to do in just a moment. We're going to offer space for our grief and invite in compassion for the suffering of so many around the world. And so Dorothy will just share in the chat as we hold all of these shares as they continue to come in. Dorothy will share a few technical things just to begin. And we know there are many folks entered on Dorothy's link, so you got blessed with her name, and you can always rename yourself clicking the three dots in the upper right corner of your video box. But I'll turn it to Dorothy.
Oh, hi, everybody. So sorry about that mistake. You can probably message me if you need help renaming yourself. We ask that you stay muted when you're not speaking. And then, if possible, come on camera. We like to see everybody. And you can see it's still dark over here in Hawaii, but I got the camera on. And the chat, I will go ahead and close that during the meditation to keep the distractions down, but then open it up again. Also, if you want to save the chat, you can go to three dots at the top right and click Save the Chat. But I should be sending out an email in about a week with the recording link and some of the resources from the chat too. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, dear Dorothy. We put some links in the chat for you for later, for the upcoming sessions and how you might donate if you still would like to do that. Okay, so we'll move into a time of practice now. So coming into whichever position is comfortable and supportive for you. And feeling your body, just connecting with the experience of uh, your body in space, what you're connected to, what you're touching. Feeling the weight of your body. And allowing your body to really give its weight over to the support of the earth. Have a sense of this vast and also fragile earth, holding all of us. Alive along with all of us and all of life on this planet. Just feel your own aliveness within this larger reality of aliveness. Feeling your breath flowing in and flowing out. And if it feels supportive for you, taking a few deeper breaths, allowing the air all the way in down to the bottom of your lungs, and a long, slow exhale. You can continue with that as long as you wish. Whenever you feel ready to allow the breath to return to its natural rhythm, you can do that. And so honoring the, the fact that you are still alive, that your breath can breathe you, that life can animate you from within, from without. Honor the sacredness of your life. Reflecting also on the lives of those around you, those dear to you, who are breathing in and breathing out with you, honoring their aliveness. Feeling grateful for your loved ones. Breathing with them in awareness. And opening to the presence of everyone on this call. Some 130 people. Every one of us breathing in, breathing out together. Connected everywhere around the globe, wherever we are calling in from. Honoring the life of those right here on this call. Feeling grateful for this community of fellow travelers on this path of engaged spirituality, siblings in beloved community. And extending our awareness to the lives of everyone, all the humans, all the animals, plants, all the beings on this earth. Who breathe with us and experience the sun shining on them and partake of the waters that we also partake of. Honoring each of their lives. Feeling grateful for life a little bit everywhere. Connecting to the energy of compassion that wishes to relieve suffering, to protect life. And so, as we are aware of the very recent war that has started last night, and also all the places that are at war, that are not at peace, where people's and animals, many beings' lives are not protected. We extend our energy of compassion, of tenderness, of care to all of these beings in all of these places. May their suffering be eased. May their pain cease. May they be able to hold their pain with compassion. May they meet tenderness. Breathing in and out with great care for the suffering in our world. May all sorrows come to an end. May all beings be cherished and held in love and safety. May no one do harm to anyone. May no one put the life of anyone in danger. Let no one out of anger or ill will wish anyone any harm. Just as a mother loves and protects her only child at the risk of her own life, we cultivate boundless love to offer to the entire universe, above, below, and across. Boundless compassion. May our love and compassion know no obstacles. May our hearts be absolutely free from hatred and enmity. We close this practice, allowing this sound of the bell to radiate out in our hearts and throughout the whole cosmos, carrying the energy of compassion.
Thank you, Kyra Jewel, for this practice. And thank you, everyone, for practicing with us. And so now we will move into the interview with Robert Ellsberg. It's an interview that we conducted a few months ago, or maybe last year, about a year or so ago. We normally have guests who come here live, but in this particular situation, there is some technical issues, and when we held this event live, not many people were notified. So we wanted to sort of make sure that we don't lose this wonderful opportunity to learn from Robert, but also to learn from Dorothy Day. And so the video will go for a little while. I will be primarily interviewing him, and then after that we will have some time for journaling and also for sharing, so we may kind of process together how is Dorothy Day calling us to be present in our world today. So Kyra Jewel will share the video, and the video will start with just our introduction to Robert. And maybe just a kind of footnote, when we were recording it, unfortunately we didn't spotlight the speaker, and the quality may not be as amazing, but the message is extraordinary. So I know you will appreciate this.
So can you all see that three people on your screen? You can see that? Okay. I'm going to press play, and then I'm going to ask you to raise your thumbs if you can hear it. Okay.
Okay, thank you for meditating with me. So today we have
I think we might have lost sound, Kyra Jewel.
Yes, we don't have the sound.
And you're on mute too, Kyra Jewel.
Adam, you're also on mute.
Yes, just give us 1 second. We're having some difficulties. Hold on. She
So you're not hearing the video?
appointed him as editor-in-chief of the Catholic Worker newspaper that I know I used to read when I was in college, and we still get it at our diocese. So whenever I see a new issue, I'm always eager to read it. Since then, he has curated and edited some of the most important collections of Dorothy Day's writings, including The Duty of the Light, the Diaries of Dorothy Day, also selected letters of Dorothy Day. Through his own books, among my favorites are The Saint's Guide to Happiness, and that is something that I return to quite often. I originally, I think, discovered this copy. A priest sent it to me because he said, I spent, my whole retreat going through this book, and you should absolutely have it. So the copy that was sent to me has many, many notes in it. Another book that was a companion on my last retreat was A Living Gospel, Reading God's Story in Holy Lives. In addition to that, there are some other wonderful books, such as Dearest Sister Wendy, A Surprising Story of Faith and Friendship. which is an extraordinary book of really letters documenting the friendship between this amazing elderly wise nun and Robert. And just maybe something about Orby's books that I wanted to say. It's one of the most extraordinary publishing houses. You know, when I go to bookstores, I often find myself in the religion section, and my first impulse is always to go like this to scan for the Orbis logo, because I know that when there is something with Orbis logo, most likely it's going to be very good. And Orbis is known for really kind of introducing the liberation theology in the US, and over the years, I mean, over the decades, has published so many extraordinary books, and Robert has been responsible for all of that. So I'm so grateful for his work there. And maybe one final thing that I wanted to mention is that Robert sort of continues to carry forward a legacy of faithful witness, something that runs deep in his family, because he's a son of Daniel Ellsberg, the very well-known whistleblower who risked everything to release the Pentagon Papers and expose the truth about the Vietnam War. So Robert, thank you so much for being here. We are so grateful that you are here with us, and we are so grateful that we can see you again.
Thank you very much, Adam. It's wonderful to be with you.
So
could I add one thing to the
yes.
introduction? We're very lucky to have Robert as a friend, and I just wanted to share that Robert got to spend time with Thich Nhat Hanh as a young teenager. He found him in the age of no cell phones or GPS or internet. He found him in Paris, coming from England, and spent some time with Thai and Sister Chung Kong in the very early days when they were still working with refugees coming out of Vietnam, living in Paris. So he has lovely stories about that. And Orbis published a book on essential writings of Thich Nhat Hanh also. So just want to loop that.
Which Robert edited, and it's my favorite collection of Thich Nhat Hanh's writings.
Which I don't think that book would have come into being without Robert initiating that, saying we need to do this. So anyway, because last speaker series was on Thai, I just wanted to bring that connection here. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks. So, Robert, you've met so many of my favorite sort of saints. I'm a little jealous, but I'm so glad that you always are willing to share their stories. And one of those people is Dorothy Day. I discovered Dorothy Day after coming to this country as I was going to college. And I think it was Father Robert Lauder, who taught at St. John's University, and he taught existentialism and was sort of fascinated with films, and he encouraged all of his students to read Dorothy. That's how I discovered her in Poland. We didn't necessarily know about her, even though recently a new excellent biography in Polish came out. So we're very happy about that. But I was wondering if you could just maybe introduce her to us before we even sort of get into, how it was to be around her, just sort of basics of her life, and some of the turning points that really defined her path.
Gladly. Thank you very much, both Kyra, Joel, and Adam. I consider myself very lucky to have met you among one of the great souls that I've known, and to be your friend. And I'm glad to be here with you tonight to talk about Dorothy. Dorothy Day died in 1980 at the age of 83. And I worked with her, as it turned out, the last 5 years of her life. I knew her as a kind of a heroic peacemaker, activist, I came to the Catholic Worker at the sort of tail end of the Vietnam War, which had, because of my father and other things, had weighed very heavily on my early life. And I was sort of looking for a path of how to live out my own kind of commitment at that point to the philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi. And I kind of lit upon the Catholic Worker as a good place to start. I wasn't a Catholic at the time. I'd been raised in the Episcopal Church, but her Catholicism was not what drew me there. I went there in spite of that. So it was quite remarkable that after just a few months, she asked me to be the managing editor of the Catholic Worker. And so I didn't really go there knowing a whole lot about her. Since then, I've now, this year actually will be 50 years since I went there, which seems pretty hard to believe. So, really my whole life has been spent trying to figure out just who she was and kind of reflect on the things that she taught me. A lot of that has come not from knowing her, but from living deeply with her writings over all those years. I edited my first volume of her writings just after she died. It was published in 1983, Dorothy Day's Selected Writings, which meant that I read everything that had been published. Later on, I was asked to edit her diaries and her letters, and that opened up a whole new world for me in terms of understanding her. And as you say, it's continued up to the present 6 volumes that I've done. So, anybody, can know Dorothy in that way now through the work that I've studied and shared. But otherwise, Dorothy is very well known for her autobiography, The Long Loneliness, which is kind of a classic spiritual memoir published in 1952. She published an earlier memoir in 1938 that just told the earlier part of her life and her up to her conversion, becoming a Catholic at the age of whatever that was, 26 or something like that. The Long Loneliness tells that whole story in greater detail, very artfully, but then also the second half of her life, which began in 1932 when she met a Frenchman named Peter Morin, who opened up her real vocation in the Catholic Worker and the rest of her life. Going back, so she was born in 1897. She had a kind of pious side to her even as a child, though her family were not religious. When she went to college, she actually gave up any interest in Christianity because she felt that Christians were not really addressing the issues, the world of the poor and issues of social injustice. She, by that time, her heroes were labor organizers and the socialists and anarchists, and she wanted to walk in their footsteps. So she dropped out of college after 2 years and went to New York, where she worked as a young woman on a series of left-wing journals. And so all of her friends were radicals of one stripe or another. Many of them became founding members of the Communist Party, but there were anarchists and labor activists and members of the IWW, the International Workers of the World. There were pacifists, there were other kinds of poets and literary bohemian types. And so that was the kind of world that she was in. And even there, again, in her memoir, she recalls all these experiences that show that, as she said, all my life I was haunted by God, not in a formal connection with any church or religion at that point, but you see that it was kind of this part of her restlessness was this kind of spiritual yearning for the transcendent, for some deeper meaning, but it was kind of in competition with her commitment to social justice in this world, because she felt that Christians sort of put all their emphasis on heaven and the by and by, and not really engaged with trying to change the world. She said that when she learned about the saints as a young girl, she said she admired their service to the poor and the sick. She said, but there was another question in her mind. Why was so much done to to minister to to the poor and the sick, and not to change the social conditions that cause so much poverty. Where were the saints that changed the social order? She said, not just to minister to the slaves, but to do away with slavery. So that was a challenge that she felt, as a young person, and in many ways it kind of pointed in the direction of her vocation, how to try to find that path of holiness that connected her faith, her religious striving with a commitment to the poor and oppressed. So in her memoir, she looks back at her whole life, of course, from the perspective of her conversion, and sees and had the feeling that everything that had happened to her before that, that God was present in that, and not just in these kind of moments of piety or spiritual exaltation, but even in the kind of tragic aspects of her life. She was arrested with the suffragists for picketing in front of the White House, and spent 10 days fasting in jail. And it was a very brutal experience in solitary confinement. She had kind of at her lowest point, she had a kind of passionate love affair with a newspaper man, found that she was pregnant, and ended up having an abortion, which didn't go well. And she said afterwards she actually tried to kill herself twice. So she had these, there's a lot of drama in her early life. A kind of turning point begins in the mid-20s, when she's now living in Staten Island. She falls in love with a man named Forster, and she finds real happiness for the first time in her life, real love. He's kind of a sort of a naturalist, is very interested in science, and he just made nature come alive for her in a new way. She'd always been a city person. And she found herself in her happiness just finding that she was praying as she walked along the beach, reading the Psalms and thinking about God, not because she was unhappy, but because she was happy. And at that point, she discovered that she was pregnant again. And this was a huge event for her. I think she had believed that she couldn't have children after her abortion. And it seemed like this sort of second chance. And she decided that she wanted to have her child baptized as a Catholic. Why a Catholic? She thought that the Catholic Church was the church of the poor. She loved the kind of sacramental sort of, spirituality of the church. The bread and wine and the incense and candles and all this sort of thing. The very physicality of it appealed to her. She had been dipping into the lives of the saints, but she didn't actually know any Catholics. So it was, in a way, it was very surprising to her friends who were atheists. Those included Forster, her partner. He had nothing. It would have nothing to do with religion, and he would not get married. He didn't believe in marriage as an anarchist. And so, she went ahead and had her child baptized, Tamar, her daughter, and then felt increasingly it was inevitable that she was going to follow on that path. But it was just terrible tension between the two of them, because she kept hoping that he would agree to marry her, and he wouldn't. So she went in to be baptized and had no feeling of joy in that. She felt kind of sick to her stomach. She describes going on the Staten Island ferry out to Staten Island to do this. She said it was just something I had to do. She said it got to the point where it was a choice between God and man, and I chose God painfully. Now, it's more complicated than that, as I discovered when I edited her letters, and discovered that for 5 years after that, she was writing him these plaintive, pleading love letters, trying to persuade him to change his mind to marry her. I think that's a story that was not, she didn't tell that in her book, and it adds, I think, extra kind of pathos to the whole story. The turning point then comes in December 1932. She goes to Washington this is during the Depression, to cover a hunger march of the unemployed, which was being organized by her old communist friends. And as she watched this march, she thought, why aren't Catholics leading a march like this? So she goes to the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C. It was actually the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. And she said she there offered a prayer with tears and much anguish that some way would open up for her to connect her faith with her commitment to the poor and oppressed. Because apart from the separation from Forster, she felt this other loss. She felt that she was betraying her class, she was betraying her radical friends and all those who had kind of brought her, she felt, to this point through their love of the poor, their dedication to the poor. At that time, she didn't see how the church could connect with that. So she makes this prayer that she'll find her vocation. Immediately after that, she writes to Forster and says, I realize it's hopeless. I'm giving up on this hope that we're going to be together. And at the same time, she meets this man, Peter Morin, this French kind of peasant philosopher who was 20 years older than she was, who had been tramping around the country doing hard manual labor, studying, and trying to find somebody who would set his kind of his mission into action. And he began instructing her about history and about economics and about kind of Catholic history, the saints, and all this was, perspective that she didn't not familiar with before. But the thing that really hooked into her was when he suggested that she start a newspaper to promote the kind of radical social message of the gospel. And immediately that kind of rang a bell. That seemed like, this is what I'm made to do. She's been a newspaper person all her life. Her family were all in the newspaper business. So she knew how to do that. And she saw that there was a real need for that. And the amazing thing is, here she is, this convert, single mother, hardly knew any Catholics at the time, had not studied theology or, been through some kind of formation like that. She'd just been baptized and going to Mass every day and reading the Bible. And she decides to start a newspaper, call it the Catholic Worker, and without asking permission from anybody. And the whole idea of this was to show that the Catholic Church can be concerned both with this world and the next, with body and soul, with the material and the spiritual, and that this was a message, that she wanted to bring to the workers and the unemployed. And Peter Morin had a further, step in his program, which was that there should be houses of hospitality to practice the works of mercy, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, etc. And so the paper then was followed by this. And before you knew it, there was a community there living in voluntary poverty among the poor, practicing the works of mercy. But one of the things that was distinctive about the Catholic Worker was that it combined not just this charity or a service, or works of mercy, but also a radical social critique of a society that the values that gave rise to such poverty and need. So it was that kind of combination of, charity and justice was something that she kind of invented. And there was a large response to it, but there was also a deep spiritual foundation because she now found a way of bringing her kind of radical, background into the church with her, and this understanding, recognition that Jesus was a working man. He was a poor man who spent his life among the poor and had a message of hope and liberation for the poor, and that he challenged the powerful of his age, and that had a still radical message for us now. And his message that what we do for the least of his brothers and sisters, we do directly to him, meant that Jesus was not somebody from just 2,000 years ago. To be a Christian was to live in daily kind of confrontation with the living Christ in the faces of the poor and our neighbor. And you loved your neighbor by feeding him, but you also by trying to change a society that left him hungry. So that was, this kind of a long entry. When it comes after that is the whole story of the Catholic Worker. We get into that too, if you want.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that, Robert. I'm sort of interested in a couple of things based on what you shared. Number one, just sort of the basic program of the Catholic worker in terms of, you know, the discussions for the clarification of thought, the sort of farms and the houses of hospitality. How does all of it kind of come together, and how is it lived as it emerges out of those initial days?
Well, it's funny how, you know, the worker didn't begin with a sort of manifesto or you know, complex program. It was sort of experimental, but it really did. She really did draw and was very inspired by ideas of Peter Morin. I mean, he was sort of an idea man, and she kind of did all the work, you might say, set this in motion. But he had written hundreds of little essays that you know reflected his philosophy. So one of those was that this kind of idea of personalism, that you should live out the values that you're promoting, and it was not enough just to have a newspaper that just protested and pointed to all the things that were bad in the world. You had to have a kind of positive vision of an alternative, and you should try to live out that vision in the present. Even now, you know, this old radical expression, building the new world in the shell of the old. So that was an aspect of it. They drew, you know, from a kind of eclectic sources in the Christian tradition, including the kind of Benedictine ideal of community, and which includes also the practice of hospitality. Mm-hmm. The kind of balance of a kind of philosophy of work you talked about, of combining the work could be undertaken in a way that had the character of prayer. You know, if it was done with a kind of holy intention, and like you know, Saint Benedict, in the rule of Saint Benedict, says that that the monastery is a school of charity. And it's not just because everybody is so nice in the monastery, but as opposed to the old kind of idea of the desert fathers who went off into the desert and kind of battled their kind of demons in extreme isolation and asceticism, that the discipline, the asceticism of the monastery was in community and learning to love the people who are close by you, whether they were very likable or not. So the Catholic worker always had, this kind of a very inclusive sort of feeling of there were people who were so-called guests who might be there temporarily or might be there for the rest of their lives, who were kind of part of this sort of family. And they were often, people who had come there out of need of a place to stay and had kind of stayed on and become part of this community. Then there were people who were there, often younger people who, for a shorter period of time, like me, who were, kind of drawn by the ideas of the Catholic worker, and it was a kind of school, which is, Dorothy said that was part of what it was all about. So, the works of mercy, of course, and then, in the, early on in the 30s, and then continued to another kind of unique aspect of the Catholic worker was the commitment to nonviolence, gospel nonviolence that Dorothy really brought into the church at a time when, when pacifism or something was something that was considered for, people in peace churches, like Quakers or Mennonites or Anabaptists, something like that. Not for Catholics. Catholics, strong believers in just war theory and that sort of thing. And this was remarkable that Dorothy, who again, who is she? She's, started the Catholic work when she was 35. And suddenly she's got a whole kind of a vision. But for her, it just followed directly from the Sermon on the Mount and Jesus's teachings on the love of enemies and of the kind of nonviolence that he practiced in his life as well as in his teachings. Blessed are the peacemakers. Those who live by the sword will die by the sword. and had kind of brought a different way. And this was a kind of teaching that, aside from these peace churches and the Franciscans and certain religious communities, was a kind of lost teaching of the gospel. So much canon law, so much theology, based on slim little interpretations of the New Testament or the writings of Paul or something like that, and seeming to not take seriously, in the slightest, what Jesus seemed to say about peace. But for her, it also was connected to that, Jesus is teaching that what we do for the least of our neighbors, what we do to others, is what we're doing directly to him. And that's not just in feeding him, it could also be in torturing him or bombing him. So that was one of the kind of most radical aspects of the Catholic worker, which it's funny, someone today corrected me when I said this first was expressed in the Spanish Civil War. And she said, oh, no, it was actually the Ethiopian War, the Italian invasion of Abyssinia, earlier than that. And I said, well, no one cared about that. I mean, that was not controversial. Nobody would pay any attention if you said, I'm not taking a side on the Abyssinian War. The Spanish Civil War, however, was really divided. Her friends on the left, who were all in support of the Loyalists, and the Catholic Church almost, universally supporting Franco, very few exceptions. So that was considered very controversial, and from people on both sides who might have been sympathetic to her. And then World War II came, and she published this thing saying that the Sermon on the Mount is our manifesto, and that she was going to continue her pacifist position. The Catholic worker shrunk at that time. A lot of people walked sadly away. In the 1950s, she became more of an activist. She was arrested every year for refusing to participate in compulsory civil defense drills. And in the 60s, then, with the rise of the anti-Vietnam War movement, there really was now a growing Catholic peace movement, the Catholic Peace Fellowship, Pax Christi, things like that, the Americans that came out of that. And suddenly, people began to listen and take more seriously what she'd been saying all along. Another aspect of it, though, was this from Peter Morin. He had a strong critique of just urban industrial society, and believed that we had to get back in touch with the earth and with land. So kind of farming communes were also a part of the Catholic worker movement, and they were never, amounted to very successful farms. But I think that now I look at that in a different way, as being this sort of ecological consciousness that was part of the Catholic worker from the beginning. This care for our common home, as Pope Francis puts it. So there's another kind of prophetic aspect of it. Well, a long answer that we can.
No, that's great. Thank you for that. And Robert, what was it like to sort of work with her? What was she like as a person in daily life, in conversation, in community? Because, it's one thing to sort of interact with her writings, but I'm curious, what was your sense when you met her? I remember, I shared it with you over email. I initially went to the Catholic worker in New York, helping them to fold papers. And that was because I was attracted to one of their activists who was, a known kind of Christian anarchist. And very soon I realized that everyone around the table was there because of Dorothy. They answered questions about the guy that I was interested in, but they always went back to Dorothy. So I'm curious, how was it like?
Well, of course, I was there, toward the end of her life. And, obviously she was, in an earlier time was maybe a more formidable figure. And she had kind of run the house with kind of a firm sort of discipline. Didn't have much tolerance for nonsense, and and was very opposed to when the kind of early counterculture in the early 60s began to arrive at the Catholic Worker before anywhere else. And she was, very disturbed by the kind of free love sort of era of the counterculture in the 60s and everything. She was very traditional in her Catholic moral, values. She had, her in her own life had everything in her life had come out of this sacrifice that she made, and giving up the, man she loved, the father of her child, for the sake of her faith. And that meant that she set very high standards for other people as well. I think as she got older, she became a little softer and sympathetic and identified with the young people because she saw so much of her early life in them, and their kind of yearning for love, their yearning for community, their yearning for some kind of a purpose, and their kind of spirit of instinct for the heroic, as she said, willingness to make sacrifices, willingness to compete with for doing things that were hard rather than just seeking the easy way. And I think that it was remarkable that she seemed to see something in me that evidently to entrust me with this work that I was otherwise completely unqualified for. And yet you could say, well, did she is that how I ended up becoming an editor, or did she see that capacity in me? I think a little of both, because I'd written some articles for the Catholic Worker about Gandhian philosophy, about Gandhian approach to economics and politics and spirituality, and she liked that so much. I think that's had a lot to do with why she asked me to do this, apart from the fact that no one else really wanted the job at that time. So again, these things in your life that you look back and you say, gosh, this door opened and it changed everything in my life. So I'd only been planning to stay there for a few months, and I ended up staying there for 5 years because she asked me to be the editor. I only did that for 2 years, but it was kind of a life-changing thing. And but the other aspect of it was that she was so fun to be with. And that's something that you don't really necessarily get from reading her. You have to experience that. Yeah. That she was very funny. She was a wonderful storyteller. She loved to be around people. She loved conversation. She had a curiosity about people, wanted to know where they were from, and she could find some sort of point of connection. And sometimes that would be, something that, that you couldn't escape. Like, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day who said that when she found out that he had read her favorite book, Bread and Wine by Ignacio Silone, that's all she ever wanted to talk about with him. She pointed me out to a reporter who was there one time interviewing, and she pointed at me and said he became a Christian from reading Gandhi. She liked that. It was a time when kind of activism was kind of being renewed in the worker around anti-nuclear things and the arms race, and so there was we were always going off and getting arrested and going to jail and stuff. She admired people who were hard workers, and she really felt that there should be a balance between work and study. And so people who just worked and didn't ever think about things, were missing something. But more often, people who, like me, who like to just read books and stuff, we had to prove that we were, willing to get our hands dirty, But she, everybody in the house, kind of, lit up when she came in, and that included, the homeless women who were living there, and people off the street all knew about Dorothy and behaved themselves, more or less, if they weren't drunk when she was around. She was a great reader. She was always reading novels over and over again and talking about literature. She was spent a lot of her time writing letters. It was probably her major occupation. She probably spent hours every day doing that. Sometimes she needed to get away, and she would go on a bus trip somewhere, and on a speaking trip, and that time just alone in a bus was very precious, kind of hermitage for her. She got up, very early in the morning every day to read scripture, to say the office, always had a rosary in her pocket. She went to daily mass, and kind of the language of the Psalms and stories of the saints were, always in her conversation. She had a very appealing, infectious kind of laugh. She didn't like to be photographed very much, and so when she's being photographed, she's always sort of scowling and looking kind of like a mean old lady. And so, but that was not her. She was also a little deaf, and so she's, often you see her kind of straining to hear what you're saying, But she was, there was a youthfulness to her, even as she was, very old. Of course, for when we were young, when she was in her 40s, people thought she was really old, but she was pretty old when I saw her, toward the end of her life. Had walked with a cane, and she was kind of stooped over, very thin. But she was always up for an adventure, and she never kind of gave the impression that she'd retired. She couldn't do everything herself, but she was there, kind of rooting us on. She said, "You must always aim high, because if you lower your standards, you won't struggle so hard." And she, again, she always was reminding us not to focus so much on just protesting things, but that we had to live by and believe in and promote an alternative, different kind of values. And we had to show that we could live by those values ourselves, not just point out what was wrong with everybody else. So, that's a little bit.
Yeah, thank you for that. And in terms of, you edited this new wonderful book about her, just sort of a collection of her spiritual writings. I'm curious if we were to sort of talk about some major themes of her spirituality. Like I know in the book, you mentioned this wonderful thing about looking at your life almost as a kind of book of scripture, that where you kind of, that becomes your revelation, so to speak. I'm curious if you could just maybe talk a couple of those themes, like if we were to sort of, I don't know, follow in her footsteps.
I read a kind of a prayer that Pope Francis wrote when he became a priest. He was, working at Bergoglio then, an Argentinian Jesuit, and it was a creed where he kind of, all the reference to God and Jesus and Mary and the saints, everything, were all integrated into, aspects of his own life story. And he says at one point, I believe in my life story, That's that if that God is not just in heaven and not just in the scripture, not just in the Eucharist or something, that to believe that God is in our story, that going into just exactly the kind of questions that you were asking during our meditation, to think about who are the people who came into our lives in an important way and pointed us in the right direction, or challenged us, or made an impact on us, or made an impression on us that changed our lives. And Dorothy, in writing about her life, there were these just very small moments sometimes that she was able to remember decades later. One of them was when she was a little girl and she was living in Chicago, and she was looking for her neighbor, her friend, Catherine Barrett, who lived next door in this tenement building. And she just burst into the apartment looking for Catherine, and instead found her mother on her knees saying her prayers. And she kind of was embarrassed, and she, something private or secret that she walked in on. But Mrs. Barrett just stopped stopped and said, Catherine's not here, come back later or whatever. Then she went back to her prayers. And she said that Dorothy says that she thought about that, not just then, but over many, many years, to think of this woman raising all these children in this tenement and building and not much money and hard pressed and not very much time alone, but she would do her dishes and she would get down and she would pray, and it gave some kind of transcendent meaning or value to her hard kind of pressed life, and that kind of lit something up in Dorothy, that she found something attractive and compelling there, even as a child. And she could look back over a lifetime, at something like that and say, that's something where I glimpsed something of the kind of true and the beautiful, So, what was interesting in her story, but she's like St. Augustine or Thomas Merton like this as well, and he's kind of looking at your life from that perspective, and you see how it was not just all these moments of revelation where you had a tingly feeling, about God's presence, but often the times of dejection and doubt and uncertainty and feeling of failure, and she had lots of those in her life, and she felt that all of those were part of the story as well of bringing her to know God. So that was, I think one of the distinctive things about her. I've already spoken about, this kind of conviction about the radical implications of the incarnation and what that means. But one thing that I knew that Saint Therese of Lisieux was one of her favorite saints. This is a French Carmelite nun who died in the same year that Dorothy was born, 1897, a little convent in Normandy, who died at the age of 24 and left a little spiritual memoir of her own that outlined her spirituality, her spiritual message, which she called the Little Way, which was this idea that in any situation, you didn't have to be in a monastery or you didn't have to do great heroic things, that there was a path to holiness wherever you were, in all of the ordinary duties and work and encounters of your life, if they were done in a spirit of love and with a sense of the presence of God, it would transform everything into this arena of holiness. And Dorothy became really fascinated by this spirituality. And she, Therese is a very popular saint. She was offered this kind of way of the holiness that was available to everybody. But for Dorothy, it was really the foundation of her life in the Catholic worker. That it meant that all of the frustrations and all of the interactions with difficult people in the house, all of these daily opportunities to practice charity, forgiveness, patience, to hold her temper, to curb her tendency to judgment, to restrain her any kind of selfishness, that was was forming her soul, as a way of holiness. And, when I came to the worker, and a lot of people would associate Dorothy with like the big things she did, getting arrested, marching with the farm workers, not paying her taxes, or standing with young men burning their draft cards, or founding the Catholic worker, or putting out a newspaper. And they think of, wow, these big things, I can never do these things. But you knew her, and you really got to get inside by reading her diaries. You see, that was just all the outer shell of a deep spiritual energy that was being fueled and refined in just these very small, ordinary interactions. But she also felt, that from Therese, this idea of the power that lies in small things and hidden things. That the importance of things is not measured by how loud they are, what a big bang they make, but sometimes just a little dripping of water, that can shatter, marble, and that it was, the importance of bearing witness and planting seeds and of taking one small step at a time. That is how some of the greatest change occurs. And it begins, of course, with ourselves. So she talked about a revolution of the heart, that had to be at the foundation of larger, dream of revolution in the world. So it was, you could begin wherever you were, but there was every little small act for peace, could be like the mustard seed, that Jesus spoke of, or the loaves and fishes that could feed a multitude, or the seed that dies in the ground and bears much fruit. So that was a very, very important part of her spirituality. She even wrote a book about Therese, which is, I don't think, a very good book, but it's just signified just how important that was to her, because she didn't write that many books.
I remember in your sort of the book of her writings, her essential writings, that I think you say something like that if you were her editor. All right, friends. Just so you know, we will share the link to this video, the original video. So there are a few more minutes left on the original interview, which you can watch on your own. But we wanted to also have some time for us to reflect, to journal, to process as to what of her message is actually relevant for us today in our own lives, but also within the context of the world that we live in. So I just posted in the chat a prompt for journaling, and we will have about 5 minutes or so journaling. And so I will read the prompt, but you can also see it in the chat. So this is what it says. When headlines are dominated by missiles abroad and ICE action at home, it's easy to feel powerless. Yet courage often grows in the small things we can actually influence. How we respond to our neighbors, how we care for the vulnerable, how we embody our values each day. And so when you feel into Dorothy Day's life and what Robert just shared with us, what is Dorothy whispering in your ear right now? And so we'll have about 5 minutes or maybe a little more for meditative sort of journaling, for listening and responding, and then we'll have a sharing before we conclude.
So we invite you now to share in a few words your responses in the chat, or maybe you want to raise your hand and you can share live. But there's space now for some for your reflections, for also if you have questions. But let's first give a little bit of space for people to share what is Dorothy Day whispering in your ear. So you may want to put things in the chat, or you can use the raise your hand button below. Clay, welcome. Good to see you.
Nice to see you. This was wonderful. What really came up for me was the point in the interview where Robert Ellsberg talks about her founding the Catholic Worker, and he says she did it without approval of support of anyone. She just felt the call to her path and she followed it. And what I wrote, what I wrote was that our institutions can provide companionship as we walk our path, but they should never block us. And a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh came to mind, which is, "To be beautiful is to be yourself. You don't need to be accepted by others. You need to accept yourself." And it was just very powerful to hear that she did this and stepped into it when she felt called.
Thank you so much, Clay.
And we have some responses in the chat as well. From Richard, to rely more firmly on the peace of God. on God, a peace that is beyond any and all of our human understanding. Someone else says, peace is every step. Then someone says, do not let grief shut you down, but instead open to new possibilities of connection to the beloved community of one world. Being experimental versus manifesto, authority versus personal connection, familiarity with life, facts of friend, importance of small things as seeds. All experience with God involves the darkness and revealed experiences. Wonderful, thank you.
And we'll read more of these, but let's hear from Charlene. Do you like to share, please?
I heard, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I heard Dorothy saying, is in all of this. God is in all people. Start in your heart where God lives, and then listen with the ear of your heart. So I'm quoting Saint Benedict here. I'm an oblate of Saint Benedict, and as I know Dorothy was, and I know how important that is. I mean, the rule starts with the word listen. And I think her example of starting every day with the prayer, I'm sure she had silence time. Even if you only have a little time for that, it's so very important. That's the foundation. And, she talked about the foundation, the revolution of the heart. And we all hear that piece starts, with ourselves. So, maybe just look for those small things to start with, just maybe it's just smiling at somebody, listening to them, just being present. Maybe that means, even in front of somebody who's saying things that you very much don't agree with, that you don't, try to be calm and not react. Or maybe it's just taking the newspaper. My neighbors who live next door to me are very much opposite of what I think, a lot of things, but I take them my paper and we keep conversation cordial. So anyway, lots more, but I won't. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's really beautiful. Thank you, Charlene.
And I think Kim and Donna.
Hi, thank you so much. This was so wonderful. It's our first time with you. We're both independent Catholic priests. And what I was thinking of, the whole idea of like, I love the question of what was Dorothy really like interacting with her. And in the early 80s, I was lucky enough to spend some time with the Catholic worker in New York City so that we could do a Good Friday die in front of a facility in New York. And Phil Berrigan was with us, and I was lying in the shape of a cross in the middle of a street in New York City. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm a little college kid. Oh, it's so holy, and look at what I'm doing. And, all those great things, that big picture that you're thinking of, like, I'm an activist for Christ. It was so great. And then Phil goes, I really hope we don't get run over. like he was just right there with his wonderful sense of humor, his humanity, the reality. This is big picture. And I'm kind of hoping we don't get run over. So it was such a nice reminder of that. We all bring our humanity, and to do this, keep your humor. Like we all have to keep our humor, keep the perspective. And it's just what we're doing right at this moment. So thank you so much for this. Really wonderful. Thank you.
Such a beautiful story, and so important to have the humor in these really difficult moments. So maybe we can read a few more in the chat, and then we'll bring our time together to a close. Cassie shares, don't let the illusion that action needs to be loud and big prevent you from doing something small, quiet, good to tend to those in need and dismantle the system that limits resources. Another, look at your life like a book of scripture, including all the mistakes. Turn down the volume a bit. You are right in doing this, but not just in what you remove or take away from your life, so you can hear. Also in how you react. Allow the benevolent voice of God to be heard by you and through you as you respond, as you wait and respond. It is okay to wait. Look wherever you are from moment to moment to see how you can make a difference. Her message is still relevant for me, to stand against injustice without taking sides. Bear witness and plant the seeds. Don't focus just on protesting, but on changing, improving the conditions which are being protested.
So many wonderful, wonderful messages. Thank you so much. And if you like, you can download the chat. And we will also follow up with an email with resources where we will share a link to a documentary about Dorothy Day, some of Robert's books, as well as where to watch the whole video. Thank you so much for being here. We're so grateful to be able to spend this time together and to reflect on this holy life, and also to wonder about how each and every one of us can find our own way of holiness in the world. And so we will conclude now with our Buddhist Christian prayer. So let us just maybe place ourselves in silence, in the presence of the one who loves us, who is love, who is peace, who is creativity. And if you like, maybe staying on mute, you can pray with us. I will begin. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is discord, union. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is confusion, clarity. Where there is sadness, joy.
May I become at all times, both now and forever, a protector for those without protection, a guide for those who have lost their way, a ship for those with oceans to cross, a bridge for those with rivers to cross, a sanctuary for those in danger, a lamp for those without light, a place of refuge for those who lack shelter, and a servant to all in need. For as long as space endures and for as long as living beings remain, until then may I too abide to dispel the misery of the world.
O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.
Amen. So we really look forward to seeing you next month, if you can join us to learn about the wonderful legacy of Dipa Ma, very accomplished meditation master and teacher, and a very small Indian woman who had a very huge impact on our world. Thank you, dear ones, so much for your practice, for your presence here today, and
many blessings.
May we keep this beautiful energy of Dorothy Day going in our lives. You feel free to unmute if you'd like, and you can share your goodbyes.
Thank you, Cara Jewel. Thank you, Adam.